Hi, my name's David Rodwin, and this is the Rodwin Review. So I just got back from Val Kilmer's Citizen Twain, and it is a remarkable performance. Val Kilmer's embodiment of Mark Twain is absolutely extraordinary, especially when done in a setting this small. It rivals Hal Holbrook, who's been doing it for the last 60 years. And not only was the acting extraordinary, he actually interacted with the audience before the show. I was trying to get up to my seat, and he was there right in the house. I had no idea, and we actually up on the stairs almost got into like a wrestling match. He was just sort of horsing around with people. And that set the tone for this evening in a really wonderful sort of way. There was a spontaneousness to it that you rarely find in theater, honestly. And that's partially because Mr. Kilmer thinks of Mr. Twain as America's first stand-up comic. And in many ways, he's completely right. His pithy one-liners are unparalleled, and they are relevant still today. But the thing that this show disappointingly lacks is a spine that carries you through the entire evening. And the really sad part is that Mr. Kilmer set up the perfect device for it and then didn't employ it fully. He had an ongoing feud later in his life with Mrs. Mary Baker Eddy. And Val Kilmer makes a great point of this. He actually brings up the topic 5 times throughout the course of this short 90-minute show, but he never went deep enough into what it was really all about. Yes, he let us know that she founded the Christian Science Monitor and made a joke that it probably wouldn't last, but she did so much more than that. Mr. Kilmer told us first that Mrs. Eddy was the most famous female author of his day. Great. He never, however, told us what she wrote. In fact, she wrote Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures. Why? Because she was the founder and discoverer of the Church of Christ Scientist. She is the only woman to have founded a major religion in the entire world. And what we don't know today is that Christian Science was an enormous trend back when Mr. Twain was writing. He actually wrote an entire book condemning Mrs. Eddy, going point by point. It can also be summed up in one pithy little epigram that Mr. Kilmer did not even give us last night, which is that Mark Twain famously said, "Christian Science is neither Christian nor scientific." Now, Val Kilmer mentions the book, but it's so glancingly that it doesn't make an impact. And he certainly never lets the audience in that his daughter was an adherent of Mrs. Eddy who was trying to get people to heal themselves through prayer. His daughter died. And when you have a religion that believes prayer heals, and not just heals sickness, it heals sickness, sin, and death. Mr. Kilmer set up an excellent conflict which he didn't play out in the actual text that he used. Now, just so you know, he wasn't limited the way Hal Holbrook was to everything and anything that Mark Twain wrote. No, not at all. In fact, Mr. Kilmer was downright improvising at times. He was making modern, if not postmodern references. He made jokes about Dick Cheney sandwiched in between the actual Mark Twain jokes about Congress and the president. And he talks to God, actually, in the course of this production, and God wants him to apologize for the things he said to Mrs. Eddy. I would have loved to have seen him play with the idea that Twain is in turmoil based on his daughter's deaths and his wife's death, and he's dealing with it by numbing the pain through alcohol. Now, if we could play with that and play with Mrs. Eddy, who believes in not taking any drugs, pharmaceutical or pleasurable, and not drinking at all, we have so much grist for the mill. So the show is still in development, and Mr. Kilmer actually had a wonderful talk back afterwards where he handled even the crazy people in the audience very well. Kudos to you, sir. But, Mr. Kilmer, I beg of you, go back into this piece and really explore the depths of his relationship with Mrs. Eddy and how that relates to his daughter. It can have such a profoundly emotional impact if you do that. Share that with us. I know you said there isn't enough time because you're doing this without an intermission, but I disagree. You took the time to go back to the subject 5 times. You literally have God electrocuting you with a lightning bolt when you refuse to really apologize to Mrs. Eddy, and then when you finally do, it doesn't have any emotional depth because we don't really know what this is all about. Let us in. Let the audience in. I hope Mr. Kilmer gets to go do this again, and I hope you get to go see it because his performance of Mark Twain is an astonishing thing to see. My name's David Rodwin, and this is the Rodwin Review. So I just saw Theater Movement Bazaar's newest production, Hot Cat, based on Tennessee Williams' Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. And it was amazing. You must go. It's playing in Los Angeles, a theater of note, for just a few more weeks.